Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures, it begins quietly, with a small act of kindness between two strangers. What started as a fleeting moment of compassion on a rainy evening would soon unfold into a journey neither of them could have imagined, from strangers who barely exchanged words, to soulmates who would redefine what it meant to truly belong. It was one of those evenings when the city seemed to sigh under the weight of its own chaos. The rain came down in sheets, filling potholes with muddy water, slowing down traffic, and sending people scrambling under bus stops and coffee shop awnings. Claire was among them. Her umbrella had snapped inside out with one gust of wind, and now she stood drenched, clutching her handbag close as if it could protect her from the storm. She had just left work after a grueling day, where her boss had scolded her for a mistake she didn't make and where her coworkers' whispers of competition seemed sharper than ever. Her shoes were soaked through, her hair stuck to her face, and her spirit felt as heavy as the storm itself. That was when she noticed him. Standing just a few feet away under the same narrow awning was a man, tall, slightly rugged in his worn leather jacket, holding a steaming cup of coffee in one hand. Unlike others who muttered about the rain, he seemed oddly calm, his gaze distant, as though he was lost in thoughts far heavier than the weather. Claire stole a glance, not meaning to stare, but there was something about him that seemed both lonely and strong, broken and unbreakable at once. Their eyes met briefly, and she quickly looked away, embarrassed. But then the wind shifted, and her bag slipped from her shoulder, spilling papers onto the wet sidewalk. She gasped and bent down to grab them, but the rain smeared the ink, and her heart sank at the thought of losing her hard work. Before she could reach them all, the stranger was already crouched beside her, his hands steady and quick as he gathered the papers, shielding them with his jacket. "Here," he said softly, handing them to her. "Don't worry, I think most of them are safe." She blinked, surprised not just by his help but by the warmth in his tone. "Thank you," she managed, her voice trembling with exhaustion and gratitude. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but it was genuine nonetheless. "Looks like you had a rough day." Claire let out a small laugh, more a sigh than anything else. "That obvious, only because I've been there," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "Bad days feel even worse when the sky decides to agree with them." Something in the way he said it made her feel seen, as if he understood more than his words revealed. For a moment, the chaos of the city blurred into the background. They were just two strangers, standing under a broken awning, sharing silence that felt oddly comforting. Before Claire could think of what else to say, a bus pulled up with a loud hiss, and the man glanced at it. "That's mine," he said. He hesitated for a moment, as if debating whether to add something more, but then simply gave her a nod. "Take care of yourself." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Claire with her damp papers, her broken umbrella, and an inexplicable warmth in her chest that cut through the storm. She didn't know his name, and she told herself it didn't matter. But as she boarded her own bus an hour later, she realized she was still thinking about him, the stranger who had been kind when no one else seemed to notice her. A week passed, and Claire returned to her usual routine of long office hours and lonely evenings. She often thought of the man from the rain, replaying the memory in her mind like a favorite scene from a movie. She didn't expect to see him again, but fate had other plans. It was a Saturday morning, and Claire found herself at a small neighborhood cafe she rarely visited. The place smelled of fresh bread and coffee beans, and its charm was in its simplicity. She ordered her usual latte, hoping to drown out her week's frustrations with caffeine. And then she saw him, sitting by the window, sketching something in a worn notebook. Her heart skipped. It was undeniably him. He looked different in the daylight, less mysterious, more human, with slightly messy hair and an absent-minded frown as he focused on his drawing. She debated walking past, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her closer. He looked up, surprised, and recognition flickered in his eyes. "You," he said with a small smile. "The one with the broken umbrella." Claire laughed nervously. "And you, the hero of my soggy papers." He chuckled. "That's one way to put it. I'm Daniel, by the way." She introduced herself, and before she knew it, they were sharing a table. What was supposed to be a quick coffee turned into hours of conversation. Daniel was an artist, though not the kind who flaunted it. He worked part-time at a bookstore to make ends meet, spending his spare hours sketching people, places, and dreams he couldn't quite explain. Claire found herself captivated by his quiet resilience, the way he spoke about life not as a series of victories but as a canvas of lessons. He, in turn, seemed intrigued by her ambition, her vulnerability, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about the books she loved. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed again and again, sometimes by chance, sometimes because they both began to look for excuses. Coffee turned into walks in the park, late-night calls, and sharing secrets they hadn't told anyone else. Daniel confessed that he had once dreamed of showcasing his art in galleries but had given up after years of rejection. Claire admitted how she often felt invisible at work, her efforts overshadowed by louder voices. They listened to each other, not just with ears, but with hearts. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the city lights shimmer, Claire turned to him. "Do you ever feel like we weren't supposed to meet, but somehow, we were meant to?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. All the time, but life, as it often does, tested them. Their growing bond wasn't without complications. Claire's demanding job left her exhausted, and her boss warned her about distractions when she started leaving work earlier to meet Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel's struggles with money deepened, the bookstore cut his hours, and he found himself unable to pay rent some months. They tried to be strong for each other, but cracks began to show. Arguments flared. Claire accused Daniel of not trying hard enough to find stability, while Daniel accused her of letting her job define her worth. One particularly harsh night, after a fight about the future, Claire stormed off, leaving Daniel staring at the sketch he had made of her smile, now smudged by the rain on his jacket. For days, they didn't speak. Claire buried herself in work, but she felt emptier than ever. She realized she missed not just Daniel's presence but the way he made her feel, seen, valued, alive. Daniel, meanwhile, wandered the city with his sketchbook, pouring his pain into his drawings. He sketched Claire from memory, her laughter, her frustration, her quiet strength. Every line reminded him that he loved her, even when loving her wasn't easy. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Daniel showed up outside Claire's office. She was leaving late, her shoulders slumped, when she saw him standing there with a nervous smile. "I'm sorry," he said simply, holding out the sketchbook. He showed her the drawings, pages filled with her, each moment they had shared immortalized in pencil strokes. Her breath caught. You kept drawing me. Because you're the first person who made me want to keep going," he admitted. Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't care about stability or titles," she whispered. "I just don't want to lose you." In the middle of the busy street, with strangers rushing past, they embraced, letting the noise of the world fade into nothing. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was real. They knew love wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about finding someone willing to stand with you in the rain. Months passed, and their love deepened, stronger for the trials they had faced. Claire found the courage to leave her toxic job and joined a nonprofit where her passion for helping others finally thrived. Daniel, encouraged by Claire's belief in him, started submitting his art again. This time, something was different, his work was accepted, and slowly, galleries began to notice him. They celebrated small victories together, Claire's first project being recognized, Daniel selling his first painting. Through every setback and every triumph, they chose each other. One evening, they returned to the cafe where fate had brought them together the second time. Daniel had reserved the window seat, and as Claire arrived, she noticed the sketchbook on the table. He slid it toward her, open to a new drawing, a picture of them together, sitting under an umbrella, smiling despite the rain. Beneath it, he had written, "From strangers to soulmates." Claire's heart swelled. She looked at him, tears shining in her eyes, and he reached for her hand. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," Daniel said, his voice steady with quiet conviction. "But I know I want to face every storm, every sunrise, every ordinary day, with you." She nodded, unable to speak, and in that simple moment, surrounded by the scent of coffee and the hum of life around them, they knew their story had only just begun. They were no longer two lost souls seeking refuge from the rain, they were soulmates, bound by kindness, by love, by the magic of a chance encounter that changed everything. Sometimes all it takes is a single act of kindness to change the course of two lives forever. If this story touched your heart, don't just keep it to yourself, share it with someone who still believes in love, compassion, and destiny. Subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more heart-touching stories that prove kindness is the strongest force in the world.